I saw a tweet recently that suggested that Future has one of the best hip-hop discographies out there, and as crazy as it sounds to people that really don't really like trap or Future in general, and that was me about 3 or 4 years ago, to be fair, I actually kind of rate that opinion. I think he really does. In terms of consistency, you can't really go wrong. He's definitely dropped some pretty poor duds over the years, there's no doubt about that. But in terms of like the highs and the greats, Future has plenty and has been very consistent. I really rate him. I think he's put out some really great songs, great albums. I think DS2 is still fantastic. You can't go wrong with Monster either. That's obviously a really good one. But then some of my personal favorites, which other people aren't as big on as I am, The Wizard, I think, is really good, to be honest. I thought that was pretty underrated when it came out and still is. And his self-titled as well, also a pretty underrated album in the grander scheme of hip-hop that year. I think people that don't like Future forget how hard his tracks hit. I mean, play F and N. Play F and N right now. Turn off this video and play F and N and then come back. Tell me, man, that doesn't hit hard. That is a banger. That is a banger. If Run the Jewels were over that beat, spitting, you'd all love it. That is a banging beat. But at the end of the day, I know his voice can be a bit much for people. He does gargle and mumble, and it's not exactly very audible, and you can't really understand what he's saying. And then when you read what he's saying, his lyrics certainly aren't anything on the level of a top-tier lyricist. But I think what he brings to hip-hop and what he brings to music is more than lyrics. I think there's a lot to like. And this new one I think is pretty up there with another consistent album. I think I actually like this more than High Off Life. I actually really like this album. I think in terms of its sound, it doesn't really stray away too much from what he's done before. And even within the world of this album, most of the tracks do feel quite homogenous sounding. There's a lot of similarities between each track. Even some of the beats become sort of repetitive in not a bad way, because the beats generally are really good, but in a way that makes you kind of think, I could have maybe diversified it up, because they don't ever exactly have a huge amount of, you know, differentiation between them. He's playing up to his persona a little bit on some of these tracks. I think he's trying to play into that meme that's become the cult of Future, and you know, all of the Bible of misogyny, and you know how he's always talking about lean and getting high and everything like that. I think he's playing into those topics a little bit on this album. I think I'm that fella. I can't say that word, I'll say fella. I'm that fella is a track that's perfect for that, where he's talking about how, like, you know, he's this top guy that, you know, everyone wants to be. No one wants to mess with the guy. He won't put liquor in his drink, he'll put lean in his drink. I Want to Get So High as well, that track. These kinds of tracks just feel like, yeah, Future would write them, but yeah, Future would write them in a world where he's aware of the meme he's become. It's a bit of a meta thing, I think, going on here on this album sometimes. I think it is. And For a Nut as well. I mean, just listen to the title, For a Nut. You know, this guy is definitely self-aware and is playing into all kinds of memes by titling his song that. But, you know, lyrically across his track with, you know, the Gunna feature and stuff. Yeah, I think he's playing into a bit of a crowd here, isn't he? But aside from that, these tracks are still actually quite good. I mean, I don't think For a Nut is particularly that good, but the beat is okay. I think the flows are quite good as well. Future has this knack of just giving us those really speedy flows that I think are really catchy and really attention grabbing, and they're addictive as well, and they're quite intoxicating at times, in a similar way that Playboi Carti manages to do with his music. They're different kinds of artists really in the grand scheme of things, but they both bring that addictive, intoxicating atmosphere to their music. I'm really impressed with Love You Better, because he has tried this R&B thing before on Hendrix. I think that's one of his worst albums, to be honest. I think most people who listen to Future and have listened to Future would agree upon that opinion, really, generally. But this time around, he really brings the R&B here, and he sounds good. He sounds good on this track. I was taken aback because I was like, is this a feature at first? But then I noticed the tone of his voice was very Future-esque. And I was like, no, this is Future. I think the self-awareness in a different way this time around, with the lyrics about how he's trying to basically tell, you know, the girl, I hope someone will love you better than I did and I could, because I didn't do a particularly great job. Kind of reminds me of something like The Weeknd would write, in that kind of way where he's just like telling the girl to run away from him because he ain't no good. And Wait For You has a similar feel to it as well, a slowed down feel to it. That has a Drake feature on it too. I actually think the Drake feature is really good, and Drake sounds really good too. I was really impressed with these two tracks being back to back, because they do slow down the pace a little bit, and are probably the two standout tracks in terms of sounding a bit different. But actually the way that they performed the songs was just a bit of a surprise, because I know these two artists have done this before, and Drake can put me to sleep, and Future doesn't always sound too good doing it. But the fact that these two tracks sound as good as they do, and the vocals are really quite good as well, is very refreshing. What's also refreshing is Keep It Burnin' with Kanye. This is the best he has sound, Mr. Kanye, in like 4 years, and I'm probably going to get many people unsubscribing for that one opinion alone, because I know many people love this man. But seriously, man, I've not been a fan of Kanye for quite some time, and he sounds so good here. He's so hyped, he's so energetic. You know what, actually maybe even longer than 4 years, because this reminds me of something we would have got on The Life of Pablo. You know, that kind of like energetic Kanye way just kind of comes through speeding on No More Parties in LA. That kind of feel, that kind of like amped up Kanye. I want it back, and this track makes me realize that I want it back even more. In terms of best beat, I think the most detailed and kind of ear grabbing is probably Chickens. I like this one a lot. Future with that speedy flow sounds great over this. It's these kinds of tracks that make you realize how good at making just a straight up banger Future is. Like, at his worst, he's probably, you know, still giving you a bit of a hard knocking beat and rapping pretty gargly over it. But when he's at his best, he's still giving you these kinds of really hard beats. I like the chorus on this one as well, where he's just talking about wanting chickens. It sounds like, you know, a farmer in the UK demanding their demands from the UK government post-Brexit. The Way Things Going is a decent track as well. This is probably the most repetitive track, in that, you know, he's repeating the same line over and over again. It reminds me of something Lil Wayne would do. I know he does that a lot and always got away with it. But to be fair, oh God, excuse me. To be fair, it doesn't hit that point of no return where some repetitive tracks do, and you're just a bit like, oh, this is a bit too far. It's actually pretty catchy. It's not one of my favorite tracks at all, but I still think it's good. And then I'm on one as well. I like the title of that as well. Aren't you a silly sausage? You're on one. You're on one again, aren't you? But again, all the praises I've said with everything else just kind of remains here too. I haven't talked about every track, because I think it's one of those albums, to be honest, where you get a lot with one track that you would with another track, and you kind of getting the same thing each time. Not in a negative way, although a bit of diversity might have helped this album a little bit, but I still think it's really quite good. And like I say, I liked his last album, which came out 2 years ago now, I think, but it felt like it wasn't as cohesive, and you could have chopped some tracks off. And this album is impressive for Future because it's not touching an hour in length, and usually his albums do. But that 10 minutes shorter version of what you'd get usually from a Future album has actually done it a bit of a favour. I feel like sometimes he does run things on a bit long, and you could just chop off a few tracks. You don't necessarily need to do 20 track albums every time. It's still 16 tracks, and it's still quite long in itself with how many tracks there are. But the runtime is quite nice, actually. I'm impressed with Future here. Usually he just stacks albums with as many tracks as he possibly can, and he didn't do that this time. So yeah, with all that being said, I don't think it's as good as some of his best work, so I'm still going to go a 7 out of 10. A generous 7 out of 10. I think Future is giving us some good music. He is not giving us anything new at all, so I think a 7 is quite generous for what he is giving, but the music still remains to be good, and that's why I like it, and that's why I think it is as good as it is. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would love to see what people think. I know he's not got the most dedicated fan base on my channel. I can't imagine many people that follow me are going to be raving about this, but if you do like it, let me know. If you don't like it, also let me know. Thank you as always. Subscribe if you haven't already, and goodbye.